I will pause from my scene setting and turn now to our distinguished panel. I already introduced the panel. We do have in our midst Ms. Salima, Minister of Communication, Technology and Innovation, and the list goes on. So I will kickstart the panel discussion with our young Minister of Communication, Technology and Innovation from Sierra Leone. Ms. Ba, you lead Sierra Leone's efforts on digital transformation with a focus on innovation in communications technology to drive national development. What lessons could you share for African governments and policymakers to create a more supportive regulatory environment to foster technological innovation and entrepreneurship among young people? You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aliyu, for setting the stage, and I'm happy to be here in and amongst this distinguished panel. And also, I think this critical conversation about the future of Africa and the critical role innovation and technology plays into that. I think what is true for every African country, and there are three things which I'll say is true. One is the idea that we cannot allow this new digital revolution to leave us behind. I think that is true for every African country. And I also think what is true is that Africa as a continent, we cannot continue to become consumers of this new age. And taking that on board, I think in any country, in terms of looking at what we want to do, in terms of building a regulatory ecosystem, a conducive regulatory ecosystem to support this drive, I think one is understanding that this is a journey that we're on. And that is why during the first term of His Excellency the President, he was very intentional about making tech and innovation critical to his national development plan. For the very first time, His Excellency the President appointed a Chief Innovation Officer. Also, for the very first time, he set up a Directorate of Science, Tech and Innovation. These might seem small, but for a country that had not prioritized and had intentional policies and structures to support it, these were very critical and were critical towards this journey that we've started on. But then through that time, through the first time and the successes that the Directorate of Science, Technology and Innovation made, we saw now in the second term of His Excellency the President, he actually created a specific ministry, which I'm very fortunate to lead, to drive this cause and actually ensure that tech and innovation was one of the big five of his agenda. And why I'm saying this is for any country or any country within that structure that you want to prioritize or you want to do tech and innovation, you have to make it a priority, and it has to be seen as being a priority within your national agenda and structure, because that's the only way you can really make intentional moves to really move the conversation along. And I say this to say that when you're in a country where this has not been a focus area, you know, digital transformation could become a sticky business because you're literally trying to change how people do business. You're trying to change mindsets and you're trying to change structure. And without that high government prioritization, it doesn't work. I would also say, as an advice to any country that wants to do this, you have to understand the current stage of your ecosystem, and then you have to know where you want to get to. For example, earlier this year in Sierra Leone, we held our first international tech summit where we had over 1,500 young innovators, experts, policy advisors to first showcase our innovations in Sierra Leone, because I think that's one thing to understand, that you do have an ecosystem and it's important for government to give it a platform that it needs to showcase. But we also were able to share challenges and discuss some of the challenges that they faced. And we invited them to be part of the policy reform conversations that we're going to have. Because it's one thing for government to go in a room and decide this is what I think young people and young innovators need to succeed. But I think if you're designing legislations and policies about young innovators, you have to have young innovators in the room to tell you what they need. So that it was very critical for us to have them lead the design and development process within that. So, and currently where we are now is really designing intentional policies. I think in terms of understanding where we are, we understand Sierra Leone is a country within the Mano River Union of around 8 million population. So you have to design policy in terms of knowing where you want to get to when it comes to tech and innovation. The role you want to play within this global ecosystem, we believe is very important, because every country right now has a digital transformation plan. So I think you have to understand where you want to be situated within that. And for us in Sierra Leone, what we have embraced is this concept of country as a lab. That means that Sierra Leone wants to develop the ecosystem where startups can come, be based, where they can come test, seed, and then scale their ideas. So within that, we're developing an innovation entrepreneurship policy, which is really tied around 3 areas. We're looking at how we attract startups, how we attract local startups, also startups within the region, to come into Sierra Leone and use that as a home to develop their ideas. We're looking at how we develop policies that would ensure that these startups, once they're in Sierra Leone, they can thrive. And then we're also looking at, once these startups thrive, how we can retain them within Sierra Leone. So our policies are going to be central and focused around these 3 thematic areas. But then also within that, we're developing a digital startup bill, because I think one of the things we recognize is, and I think sometimes that mistake is making, is that startups are not SMEs. They don't operate the same way as SMEs, and startups need different sets of regulatory environments to enable them to succeed. So we are developing a digital startup bill, looking at best practice, what other countries have done around the world, and looking at how we tailor that based on what we're looking to develop in Sierra Leone. But then also one really flagship initiative, which His Excellency the President unveiled during the Tech Summit, is we're also developing the Philae Tech City, because we recognize that for startups to develop and thrive, they need a home. So in this Philae Tech City, we're creating the conducive environment, we're providing the infrastructure that startups would need in order to be able to succeed. That's where we're talking about issues of access to finance. I think something you mentioned just now was mentorship opportunities. We're talking about how you do market and scale, and also how you can collaborate with other startups within the country. So for us in Sierra Leone, we're really focused on how we develop intentional policies based on where our current ecosystem is, and also looking at where we want to be situated in this global ecosystem when we talk about innovation entrepreneurship.